We are going to be looking at Learning Plan 1 in Creo today. So to navigate to Learning Plan 1, you want to find on your side tab over here the learning plans, okay? So here's learning plans. And then underneath, as long as you took your syllabus quiz, you will have the learning plans available to you. And the one that we're going to focus on today is going to be Learning Plan number 1. And this is an introduction to Creo. So we're going to kind of get into things today. So once we get into this learning plan, you'll kind of see this is going to be formatted very similar to the learning plans coming up as well. Kind of give you an introduction of what to do. It says read chapter 1. When I say read, it's a loose read, okay? I'm not expecting you to sit down one night and like word for word read through it. Really, it's there for you for reference, reading sections, and then it's a similar type of a book with the tutorials and the end of chapter questions, and we're going to be running through, if you've had SolidWorks with me, it's going to be a very similar format to that. So reference, read chapter 1, then I'd like you to attend or watch the video, catch yourself up with the recording of this Learning Plan number 1 lecture. And then during this time, I'm going to be, demoing and kind of showing you what I need. Look at the course calendar for your due dates and when we're going to be covering that stuff, specific to the section that you're in. And then finally, once we've kind of gone through that process, you're going to have some learning plan homework assignments to do. And those are what's going to be building your grade in this course. So each one of our learning plans, I think there's 7, we're going to be, having this little bit of a homework at the end. And that's going to be in the folder down here at the bottom. So we're going to first start by pulling up the PowerPoint presentation, and it's in PDF format. So I'm gonna click on that. I'm gonna move this over a little bit and zoom in just a little bit. And this is gonna guide us through chapter number 1 and kind of, give us kind of the highlights, the sections that we wanna pay attention to as we go through. So I'm gonna use this to guide us in our lecture. Okay, so parametric drafting using Creo. Again, this is chapter 1, computer-aided design, in our textbook. And the textbook is going to be this SDC Productions. And they have a series of books like this in the same format for AutoCAD, SolidWorks, Creo, all different types of, other types of CAD software. They're very technically oriented. And I find that I like these books, and I found that students actually really like them as well. So I've been adopting them wherever they seem to be most appropriate. So it's going to be a very similar, if you would, flavor like we had back in SolidWorks when you had that with me. So first of all, kind of a history lesson, kind of going back, and you've heard probably some of this before, but when we look at CAD is computer-aided design, and it's really generating what used to be hand-drawn prints on large format drafting boards, and it's converting those to a digital format and then generating that the geometry and such on a computer. Okay, so the first CAD system created this electronic database of drawings that would have been in paper form and had to have gone into like a filing system. So big companies had huge rooms that would just house the prints. And they were usually in a room that was fire protected, that had the sprinklers and all that kind of stuff, because that's where all of the engineering, the knowledge, the way parts were going to be made, really the essence of how a business made money is in those prints. Okay, so they had to be protected and they had to have space, right? When we started converting over to CAD, which would have been like in the early 80s, that's when we were able to then take those paper formats and put them into digital form. And the first CAD systems, like in AutoCAD, were in the early 80s. Now, advantages of CAD are going to be, first and foremost, you can make modifications and revisions much easier. You don't have to, dig out the print and erase and all that kind of stuff and try to, still make it look nice and neat. You can make families of parts. So if you have similar parts, but maybe it's a different length or a height or a thickness, it's really easy to just copy that existing one, make the 1 or 2 changes, and then now resave it as a new part number, and you didn't have to do, maybe a fraction of the work that you would have if you would have had to, start from scratch and draw the whole thing. Files are stored digitally. You don't need those paper formats. And then there's, ways of having to store that as well. So really like footprint of how much space it would take up has really been minimized as well. Now, in terms of Creo actually didn't start out as Creo. They started out as a software called Pro-E or Pro Engineer. You may still hear people talk about that. When Pro Engineer came on the scene, if you would, they were the first ones, and I don't think they were the first one, but they were the first ones that had software that would be what we call parametric. And it's in that light of the SolidWorks. So you guys have had AutoCAD, you have had SolidWorks, and now you're getting to Creo. In AutoCAD, that was really just taking that paper drawing and like drawing it on my screen, right? 2D format. I had to put every single line down, just like if I would have been drawing on a piece of paper, okay? Except it was on a computer screen. Now, in order for me to change a part, I would have to change the feature, meaning I would have to go in, delete a line, offset it to the new distance, and then connect, the way that it was. In a parametric type of a software, instead of having to change the feature itself, you actually change the dimension. Okay, so if I have a length of something and it's 1.5 inches long here, and I just need to change it to be 3 inches long, whether it's changing or revising that individual part or making a new one, all I got to do, as you remember from SolidWorks, is I click on that dimension and I change it from 2 to 3, and all of a sudden the part updates and it's all automatic. So it's very efficient, and it's more what we call design driven as well. So we think about how that part potentially would function in the future, and we kind of build it to accommodate that. So it's a little bit more involved than just like taking this picture and putting it on a screen. We're actually building the part, creating the part, and then we're using dimensions to actually drive it. Okay, so Pro-E was one of the first ones in on that. Then Pro-E, first of all, when they came on the scene, they were very expensive. Only your best engineers and designers got to learn Pro-E. Pro-E ran on what we called workstations. Those workstations were $10,000, $12,000. They weren't PCs. It wasn't something that you would just buy off the shelf at Best Buy. You had to get a workstation that would be hooked up to a network. Now, because you were investing, that kind of money in hardware, because it needed to run, really fast graphics and all that kind of stuff, the software itself was about $60,000 for a seat. Like, one license on a workstation was about $60,000. Very, very expensive. So you usually had the most valuable, if you would, players in your department getting trained to do Pro-E, and there was only a couple people. I remember being at a company when we transitioned to Pro-E. They, it was you got sent. You were chosen to be one of those people, and those people who learned Pro-E at that time, believe it or not, and this was back in the early 90s, they were making 6 figures because they knew Pro-E. A lot of money. So what ended up happening, though, is SolidWorks came along. SolidWorks was created out of people who developed Pro-E, and they're like, this has to be cheaper. This has to be easier, okay? One of the things that you're going to find in Pro-E is that you have more control over the software. It's more of an engineering type of a software. SolidWorks is a design software, and you're going to find that it automates a lot of the things that Creo gives you control over. Now, that's good and bad, all right? That's good and bad. It's good when you're trying to, and you have to simulate things, and you want to be really specific on something. Pro-E, Creo is great. But in SolidWorks, there's more automation there. So people will a lot of times say, it's way easier to do that in SolidWorks. And I think a lot of times it is a little bit more efficient, but Pro-E is more powerful when you start wanting to do more things like simulation and finite element analysis and things like that. It's better. So companies like Manitowoc Cranes ran Pro-E because they did a lot of simulation and they had to run their stuff through advanced design software. Kohler is another Creo company, and they actually got in very early, and they did Creo from the start, and so they've adopted it and had it ever since. So we run Creo in our program because it has a place in our district, so there are jobs in Creo. Now, getting back to ProE, so that was its first version. Then once SolidWorks came along, and SolidWorks, its intent was, number one, to be a little easier to use, more user-friendly, and to run on a regular PC. Because PCs then were about $3,000 at that time. Okay, $3,000-4,000, not 12,000 for a workstation. And then they also wanted, SolidWorks said, we want it to be affordable. So they came in and they've stuck with this price pretty consistently, about $3,000. Okay, so now parametrics became available, right? It came available to kind of like the regular, maybe not the regular person, but a shop, a job shop could buy now a seat and justify it and not feel like, holy crap, we're like busting the bank here. So then SolidWorks came in. SolidWorks then, obviously, just because of those two things, running on a PC and being cheaper, and in a third thing being, I think, easier to use, they started taking over the industry. It didn't take long, and people were adopting SolidWorks. So ProE finally was like, all right, I guess we got to do something here. And they came out with Wildfire, which was their first version of on a PC and a more affordable price point. Okay, they came down to about $7,000, I think. They still weren't at the SolidWorks level, but made it more digestible. But Wildfire, I'm not going to lie, sucked. Sucked. So Wildfire became like kind of, they rebranded, if you would, their ProE name, because they wanted to go away from where, the expensive workstation based. Now we're new, we're reinvented, we're Wildfire. Wildfire, I don't even know if it got 5 years, 5 revisions. And then they came out with Creo, because Creo then was kind of fixing all the issues that they had in Wildfire. And it's kind of funny because they've been ProE, they've been Wildfire, and now Creo. And I think they're always trying to like walk away from their old mistakes, okay, or their old branding. So Creo, if you hear ProE, if you hear Pro Engineer or Wildfire, they're all kind of, Creo's just their most recent version. And they are now more in line price point with SolidWorks. I think SolidWorks is around, what, $3,700-ish, I think, to buy. And I think ProE is about, it's around 5,000, 5,200 or something like that. So it's not awful. And it runs on a PC now. So anyway, that's kind of like some of the history behind ProE. Now, here's kind of like a long timeline looking in terms of like when things started, what were the very first CAD systems, and then going all the way to, 2018-ish, okay, and what's left. So there have been, the one that has been here the entire time and has versions of all the different types of CAD is AutoCAD. Autodesk not only has AutoCAD, which is kind of that 2D version, but they also have Inventor, which is their parametric version. So there's also Inventor out there that's popular out in industry. Now, unfortunately, we don't do it here in our program, not because we don't think it's good, but there aren't as many companies in our district using Inventor. The high schools will use it because they get it free, okay? But we, as a technical college, look to the industries that are in our area, and we then are going to base our selection on what we're seeing students get, and that's SolidWorks and that's Creo. But Inventor is their version as well. There's some other companies here called CATIA and NX. Those are two other parametric softwares that would be on the order of SolidWorks and Creo. Now, Creo parametric is a standard in, it says 3D product design. So this book is about Creo, so it's going to tout, like they are the state-of-the-art productivity tool, for doing CAD. And Creo has its benefits. It's easy to use. I think you'll decide, if it's easier then. I believe that, I don't know that things are easier. They're always different. So when you look at, for instance, Microsoft Word and you look at Google Docs, they both are word processors, but which one is easier usually depends on which one did you learn on, right? So a lot of students, because Creo comes after SolidWorks, I'm not going to say they complain about Creo, but their favorite in their heart is always going to be that first one. And SolidWorks is usually the one that people say, yeah, I like that better. I sometimes have people coming who have had experience with Creo first, and they look at SolidWorks and they're like, ugh, I don't like it. So again, I think it speaks to, usually it's your choice. The one your favorite is the first one that you learned on. So easy to learn, easy to build parts from, their primitives, which are like your extrusion, revolves, your cuts, that kind of thing. Easy to make changes. You can create your 2D drawings with the dimensions from that model, and everything is connected and will update as you change from one to the other. And then it's also easy to make like assemblies and groups of components so you can see how things work together. And I think too, when we're working in model mode, if you would, and creating these solid models in parametric software, it's just easier to visualize, and you can see like the design coming to life, I think, more realistically. Than you have to have that ability to visualize when you have a 2D atmosphere like AutoCAD. Okay. So I think it's just nicer to visualize. Now, Creo does have help and resource center, and I have those here for you as well in the Creo software. And we'll get to getting started actually momentarily here. So we're going to get started looking at Creo and actually like firing things up here. Now, in our textbook here, I'm going to go down. In our textbook here, we're really starting, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. We're starting at the bottom of page 5. So the chapter here starts on page 1. There isn't really a whole lot really, in terms of illustrations, but down here at the bottom of page 5 is where we're going to get started, like opening up Creo. So what we want to do is we want to find it on the desktop, and we're going to just double click it. So the tutorial does a nice job of kind of showing us, if you would, like step by step how this looks. So I'm going to minimize my applications here. Now, if you're here in our lab, you are going to see that there is this icon. It's just a square. It's very nondescript. I don't know why Creo doesn't have like its own little, design, but what we're going to do is we're going to double click on that. Okay. And it's Creo Parametric 8.0. So I'm going to double click on that, and it's going to then launch our application. So we just got to wait for it to come up. Now, parametric software is very graphics heavy. So there's stuff that has to load, and you have to have a computer that has the ability to work with it. Yeah, it's going. My little thing is turning here. And that's why it's important, if you locally load it on a computer that you have, you're going to have to invest a little money in that computer, because typically it's going to require kind of those gaming standards because of the graphics. So it has to have a fast graphics card. I don't know the exact requirements right now, but also some memory. If you go to out to the site where you're going to download, if you choose to download locally Creo, it's going to give you those minimum requirements that you need for a machine. Your other option is to check out a computer here in the library, and then you would connect to our Citrix version to have that available at home. So that's worth a try as well. Or we have a lab that has these locally loaded and works really fast. And when you're here on campus, it's probably going to be the best performance that you have of those three options, because we have like screaming fast computers. We get them updated on a regular basis to allow running the software like this. Okay, now it's going to, if you're at the same place I am, this is kind of like the startup. So you're going to just be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to accept all the cookies, whatever. Cookies are good, chocolate chip, sugar, I don't know, whatever. And then you're going to have this screen here. You want to explore Creo. I just X out of this. This is kind of like letting you in on like what's new with the new version and that kind of thing. So I'm going to skip over this. All right. And I'm also going to X out of this as well, the 3D CAD manufacturer catalogs. We're going to X out of that. And we kind of have a fresh screen right now. Okay, so as we look here, we're on page 7, step number 1, and we just have everything loaded up. This is a fresh version. Now, something that's different about Creo than SolidWorks is we have to set a working drawing before we even like decide we're going to make a part. Okay, working directory where everything is going to be saved. So right now it is time for you to create a directory on your computer. Now, I'm going to just let you know that a couple things. When you're on campus here, you have access to what we call a home drive or your H drive. Okay, I would suggest saving there. All right, because that's going to always be available on our network when you are here on campus. It will also be available to you if you are working on a Citrix version from home. You will have your H drive available and you can save to that H drive. And then if you're working at home, it'll be saved there. And if you're working here, you'll pull it up and it'll still be there as well. So it'll be that very same drive. Now, we're going to create one directory called our working directory. And well, you can call it Creo 1 or Creo, whatever you want to call it. But we're only going to have one. We are not going to have separate directories for different files or chapters or learning plans. It's all going to be dumped into one. It's just going to make the whole semester easier if we do that. Okay. Yes, there's going to be stuff that's going to be in there, but especially when we get to assembly drawings, we need everything in the same directory because it's going to be looking for part numbers and parts at that time. Okay, so we want to make a directories, and I don't mind what you call it, but what I'm going to encourage you to do, the other thing that you may want to do is it's good to have a backup as well. So if you want to have a jump drive or on your local drive, you could back it up too. But again, it's going to be the full working directory. So you're going to want to go into your folder, to create this working directory. Now, again, I'm going to go on my H drive and I'm going to use that. You could use the OneDrive if you wanted to. You could use a jump drive. You could use your local desktop if you wanted to. But I will tell you, if you're using Citrix and you try to save to your desktop, it actually takes longer because when you are working through Citrix, you're actually working on, if you would, a machine in our lab or on our network, okay? And if you want to actually save to your desktop on your computer, it takes longer because it has to copy the file from the network and then bring it back down and kind of go back and forth between the two. So you're going to find performance is going to be slower if you're trying to always save and pull from your desktop. That's why the H drive, if you're working through Citrix, is really the most efficient and fastest way to go. A lot of times in the beginning when I don't think I was understanding it fully and students are learning, you always, at least I default to saving somewhere on my local computer because it just seems faster. But in the case of Citrix, it's not because you're working on our network, which is not your computer, okay? And you're like over the internet getting to it. So H drive is the best one. So I'm going to demonstrate my H drive. Or putting it on my H drive. So I'm going to go to my PC and I want to find my home drive, my KERY in my case. Now, if you are locally loaded, not on a Citrix version, then by all means, put it on your desktop or put it in a directory somewhere that you know where you're going to be able to access it relatively efficiently and quickly, and you know where it's at. So I'm going to go into my H drive, double click on that. And I already have a directory that's called Creo, okay? So you could create a directory right here on your H drive, or if you wanted to create a Creo directory, and then inside the Creo directory is your working drawing. That's what I did. And what I did is I'm calling mine Creo 1 2022, because I had a Creo 1 from last year, and that's like filled with all of the files. I want to now start a new class, so I'm calling it Creo 1 2022. And now this is going to be my working directory. That's going to be the directory I set up each and every time. Now, this is just there now. So I'm going to X out of this and I'm going to go back into Creo. Okay. Now, when I'm in Creo here, I'm going to go up to File, I'm going to go down to manage session. And inside of here, I'm going to say select my working directory. You have to do this every time you open Creo and when you're going, before you start creating a part, okay? It's going to let you create, it's going to let you go in there, but then your working directory is going to be just whatever your default is. And you want to have control over this so you know where they're going. So we're going to select our working directory, and now we're going to navigate to where you created that directory. So mine is not on my C drive. I have to kind of back this up. I got to go to it's my N12301, and I'm going to go on my H drive. Okay, so you got to kind of navigate here, and I'm going to double click there. And then it's going to pull up all of my directories in there. That's in my Creo is where I placed mine. You're going to go to yours. And then I'm just going to highlight. I'm not going to double click this directory. I'm just going to highlight this directory. Mine is Creo1_2022. Okay. And then I'm just going to hit OK down here. If you go into it, it's okay. All right. But I always highlight it and I hit OK. That way I know it's that directory. Now, if I want to check this to make sure, what I can do is I can go right down here in my what we call our design tree. There is a working directory. And if I go here, I want to look at this path here. This is my Creo1 2022. Okay, as long as that path is correct at the top, it's going to automatically save there. All right. Okay, that looks good. So I'm just going to X out of that, and that just verifies it's set. So again, you have to set your working directory before you worry about what we're going to do. Okay. So if we catch ourselves up here, we are, let me see here. We did steps number 1 and step number 2 at the bottom of page 7 here. And my little notes are here, you know, add in your directory. Okay. So we've got our working directory set. We've got our working directory set. Now, before we go in, the next place here would be step number 3, and they're going to have you like start the part file. But I'm going to change some settings for us that are going to be to our advantage. Okay, and so I'll kind of explain it when we go back in. So I'm going to minimize this, and right now that I'm in Creo, I am going to set some options. Now, this is a one-time deal, because we're going to save it, if you would, as a configuration file. And we're going to go up to File, and we're going to go down to Options. It's right above the exit key here. Okay, so I'm going to go to Options, and then I have to hit Options one more time. Options here. And now I'm going to get this, you know, menu that's going to pop up. And the first place that I want to go is I want to go to System Appearance. It's the third one down from the top. System Appearance. Now, in System Appearance, and I'm just going to let you in on this, some people like, let's say, a dark background or a light background or whatever. You can change it in here. I'm going to leave mine at the default, and it's a choice that you make. When we're learning what happens if we have different, for instance, different graphics up, some of the things are going to change color, be different than what you're going to see me. So in the learning, you know, phase, I always think it's good to kind of match up with what I've got here. But if you did want to kind of customize that to the colors that you want, here's where you can do it. All right, but I'm going to leave mine as default. Okay. The other place that I'm going to go is going to be in Model Display, which is directly below. And we're going to look at a couple things here. The first thing we're going to do is at the very top here, this says default model orientation, and I'm going to arrow down. I want this to be isometric. Okay. And it'll make a little bit more sense later on when we're in the environment. I'll tell you where we did that. Now, if you do a trimetric, honestly, they're pretty darn close, but isometric is kind of like the norm. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to go down to set shade quality, which is right here down below the middle part of the screen. And right now the default is 3. This is going to set for you how crisp or blurry, for instance, your edges of your graphics are. And we're going to set it to 6. Okay, that's what I'm going to set mine to. So I'm going to pull this out. This is going to be 6. I'm just going to key it in, or you can arrow up and down. Now you can put this at a very high number, like into the 60s, 70s. But what it does is when it does that, it keeps regenerating in the background and it defines that display. And sometimes if you do it too much, it'll slow your system down. Or if you don't have graphics that can handle it, it'll actually crash. So a good kind of place to start, and that is nice and clear on the screens that we have here, a 6 works really well, okay? So those are the 2 things we want to change there. Now, before we leave the screen, we're gonna hit apply at the bottom. Okay, apply. Now, the next one that we're gonna go into is gonna be Sketcher. So that's a couple down, and that's gonna go into Sketcher. And we are gonna go, we actually have to arrow down here or slide this down. And we wanna be at Sketcher Setup, Sketcher Setup. And we wanna click on the box right ahead of this where it says make the sketching plane parallel to the screen, okay? SolidWorks, this was an automatic. When you would click on the plane, it would automatically orient your sketching plane right away. Creo doesn't do that as a default, okay? So we're setting it up here, all right? So that now when we go in, so if you don't, it's not a big deal. I'll show you where you can orient yourself, but this does it automatically when we select our sketching plane. So now that that's done, we're gonna hit the OK at the bottom here, and we're gonna hit yes, because this is gonna ask us if we wanna reset our configuration file. By resetting and saving our configuration file with these new changes on the machine that we're on, that we pulled up Creo on, is now gonna have those settings automatic each time we go into Creo, okay? If you go to a different machine, so if you just set it up right now on your computer in our lab here, the next time you go onto this computer, it is going to be set for you. But if you pull this up at home now on a locally loaded version or at a different computer that you log into, you're gonna have to reset that configuration, okay? So just know that it's tied to the computer that you're on and the username that you have, okay?
Would you just double click it, or how would you?
You hit okay. What do you mean?
Well, if I was to sit at this computer.
Yeah, you have to reset it up again.
Okay, I can't just reopen the config file?
I don't think so, because that's dedicated to the version that's on that computer right there. Good morning. Okay. So, all right. So I think we're good. Yeah, because for me, I have to reset it each time when I go from my laptop to here. And then once I've done my first login here, then I'm good. Yeah, on each one. All right, so our configuration is set up then for those automatic things. Now again, that process that we just did is a one-time deal, okay? But working directory has to come first, and then we're actually gonna go in and start a new file. So we are going to hit new here, okay? Hit new, and this is step number 3 at the bottom of page 8. We're gonna hit new, and this is gonna pop up. You're gonna have an option to do a number of different things. You can do a layout, a sketch, an assembly, blah, 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 drawing. And we're gonna start with creating a part. This is where we're gonna be creating a solid part or a model. So we're gonna hit part on the left-hand side here as type, and then the subtype is gonna be solid. This should be the default that comes in when you open up this menu, okay? Now, once you have it there, then we have the opportunity to put a file name in. Okay, a file name. So right now, you could go with the default if you wanted to hit OK, but our book, our tutorial is telling us, let's call it block_with_whole. Now, I am going to just look, oopsie, not there. Sorry. I am just gonna look underneath here. Uh-oh, my camera was, no, I want to switch to another camera. I just couldn't. Did I undo it? Hold on. No, it's good. Said my camera disconnected. Do I want to go to a different one? Just say no. Oh, let me reconnect it. Hold on. So I'll go back in here. Sorry. I don't know why it disconnected. It seems to be good. Let me go one more time. There we go. Yeah, it looks like it's recognizing it now. Not sure why it cut out on me there for a second. Okay, so if we're at the top of page 9, okay? I do want to call your attention to this box that's right here. This talks about the rules for your file name, okay? And so there's a couple things that are a little bit different about Creo than about like kind of the normal like Windows atmosphere. So you cannot use things like brackets or parentheses. You can't use spaces or punctuation marks as part of your file name, okay? It doesn't allow you to do dashes or underscore, or you can do dashes or underscores, but they want your first character of your file name not to have like that hyphen or that underscore, and it has to be a number or a letter, okay? And then it has a couple other things. It also says use only lowercase for file names if you're going to be putting that in rather than uppercase. So they're just a little bit different. So take time to read that and just kind of know what you can and can't do, because sometimes it'll kind of stop you and you're like, well, what's the deal? And sometimes it's like you're violating, you know, something in here. Okay, so now we're ready. We started new and we're ready to go to step number 4. And it wants us to select the part and the solid there. And oh, I'm sorry. And then we're going to be putting in block with whole as our file name. So let me go back into Creo here. I'm going to change my file name here to block underscore with underscore whole. Now, this is the tutorial I'm going to let you in on that. If you want to follow along with me right now, catch yourself up if you haven't been. This is the tutorial that you will be handing in for part of your homework assignment for Creo, okay? So, and then I'm gonna say, okay, all right. Now, it brings me into, all right, assuming that we're gonna make this part here, it brings me into, and it wants me to choose like, okay, what am I gonna do here? Now, I'm planning on making a block. So kind of remembering back into SolidWorks, we would go right into that extrude command, and they have that here as well on the ribbon that displays. You're going to see some stuff here that probably looks like, oh, it's kind of like SolidWorks, and you'll feel confident enough because you've done SolidWorks before that you'll be able to kind of peck around, and at times you're going to find that, oh, I kind of know how this works, because a parametric software is a parametric software is a parametric software. In the end, they're going to accomplish the very same things with kind of creating the models and how they get there, but the environment that you're working in is just going to be a little different. So yeah, it looks different than SolidWorks because it's not SolidWorks, it's Creo, but it does have the same, very similar functionality. So we've got an extrude here. I'm gonna click on extrude right away. And for extrude to work, just like it was in SolidWorks, you have to create a sketch first, right? You have to create a sketch first. So we've got to figure out what plane are we going to sketch on? What are we going to start on? So as we kind of go around here, we're gonna pick it. But before we do, we have to actually click this button, define. Okay, so we're going to define it, and then this box is going to come up. When we see like this like greenish, yellowish area, it means we need to do something. And I'm going to go over here, and as I go over the top of each one of these planes, it changes. And the book, it tells us we want to actually pick the front plane. So as I hover over the top, this is the one. Before I click, is going to be my front plane. Once I have that, when I select it, it's going to populate, and then they're just going to give you a reference. The right plane is where it's supposed to be, and we're just going to hit sketch. Okay? Now, as you noticed, I went from kind of that isometric view, and now it flattened out my sketch plane to be in front of me so I can start drawing on it. When we did our configuration earlier and we checked that box in the sketcher, this is what I was doing. Now, if you didn't do that, or yours didn't automatically do that, you want to go back and you want to, set that up in options, but you also can get to the sketch view by using this kind of, this little, on this palette that is right here, this like little toolbar, just past the halfway mark, it's called sketch view. So it'll orient it for you that way, but you have to press a button to do it. Okay, now you'll notice when we're here, we have kind of that crosshairs. We've got a 0, 0 at the very middle of the screen where everything is coming together here. This is the 0, 0 for the model, okay? Most often we're going to connect to that in some way, shape, or form, kind of similar to what we did when we were in SolidWorks. So I'm going to just kind of catch up. Sketching plane. Okay. So now where we're at is we are on page 10. Okay. And we are on step number 9. And step number 9 says we're going to create a rectangle. So as we look here, we are now in like sketch mode. And these are all of our options for creating geometry. And right here, I'm just going to kind of go around. Right here is where our rectangle function is, our rectangle function. Now, if you just hover over the top of it, it gives you an explanation of what it's going to do. But when I click on it, you're going to notice that I have the ability, it now kind of, my cursor changed to where I can pick. Now, my left mouse button is going to be the mouse button that I use to like select things or pick things or click on things, just like normal. So I'm going to click when I get close to. Now, I'm going to use my roller. I'm actually just going to roll, not to press. I'm going to roll, put my cursor close to the corner here. I haven't clicked yet. I'm just rolling, rolling, rolling. I'm zooming in. Now, when I get my cursor close to that box, you see how there's like a pick box here where it like snapped to that? Creo is going to be smart like that. It's going to be like, oh, you're getting close to that intersection, then let's head over there. So once I can see that it's going to pick that point, I'm going to click because it anchors it to that center. And then I'm going to kind of go out and I'm going to create my rectangle. I'm going to go up and to the right, and then I'm going to click a second time. Now, I could continue to create rectangles. Notice I'm still in the command, okay? To end the command, this is where Creo is a little different. We're going to hit our middle mouse button, and our middle mouse button is the roller. You depress it, and if I hit that middle mouse button, it kind of releases you from the command, okay? Now, a couple things happened here. First of all, the outline is green. That means it's kind of free-flowing. It's not constrained yet. It's not fully defined yet, all right? You'll also know that it added, I'm kind of hovering over the top here, 2 dimensions. And this is the size that I'm at. And right now it's at 81.44 units and at 51.59 units, right? It's just kind of like the screen was really big when I did this. No worries. Okay, I'm going to ask you, you guys have had some SolidWorks before. What do you think I'm going to do to change these dimensions? Am I going to have to, redraw it and try to make a smaller rectangle? Double click the dimension, right? So I'm going to go over the top of my, for instance, my 51.59 here. I'm going to double click on it. It's going to activate it, right? And it's a text box that I can change. So I'm going to look on the bottom of page 10. I'm not going to keep flipping back and forth. So assuming you have this in front of you, the bottom of page 10, that height dimension is 4. So I'm just going to key in 4, hit enter, and now it made it super short. And then I'm going to double click on what is my 81.44, the length dimension, and I'm going to make that 5, and then enter. Okay. Now it's really small, right? Now I could go and put my cursor over the top of that and roll, roll, roll to get to it. But on this quick command right here, the very first icon, below the ribbon, you should have the standard little toolbar. We're going to refit. So we're going to refit, and there it is. Now, I'm going to move my dimensions so they're just a little bit more nicely placed. So I'm going to push my 4-inch dimension. I shouldn't say push. I'm going to click on it, hold, and drag it off of the part. I'm going to do the same thing here with the number 5. I'm going to kind of drag it a little bit closer because it's not only going to fit my part, but it's going to fit the dimension placement as well. I'm going to try it one more time, do that fit again, and now it's kind of like as big as it's going to be on my screen. Okay? Now, if I go down here and I click off of it. Now, when you have it activated, notice that 5 is green, but when I release it and either re-click somewhere else, it becomes black. Now, when these dimensions are black, that means that I'm fully constrained, or I'm in SolidWorks, we would say like fully defined, right? We didn't leave our sketch until everything was black, and I think the outline or the part was black too, right? But our outline isn't black, but that's okay. But when you get, for instance, this okay over here, that means you can save, you can be done with your sketch and move on. But a good check, if you're not exactly sure, especially in the beginning here, you might want to just say, oh, is my sketch good enough to go to the next step? Am I okay? Now, in a simple version like this, where it's a rectangle, even if you're not fully defined, it will probably extrude for you and look okay. The problem is when you start adding more features and you start doing different things to it, there can become a point where all of a sudden your model isn't reacting the way you're intending it to. And it might have stemmed back to one of your sketches isn't fully defined, okay? So this is always a good check to do. So what I do is I hit this feature requirements, and now in this box, it has checked off a selection must contain geometric entities, and then the feature specific requirements are also met. Notice that I have 2 green check marks. There's not if I had a more complex sketch, there would be a longer list here. But when I see all green check marks, that means I'm good to go. If I see any, they're like yield signs, okay, or red on there, then I've got a problem and I've got to figure that out, okay? So I've got green check marks. I'm going to say closed. So I'm going to hit the green check mark up here to say okay. Now again, if I'm not fully defined or if I'm not really ready to go, that I'll still be able to hit the okay button. And that's why it's a good practice to just do that check to be sure. All right, now it kind of changed on me. It now looks like this orange color. Now my orientation, my view is still straight on that my sketch view was. So right now it's automatically gone into, notice it's gone into extrude automatically, okay? And now I've got a number of options, but I want to look at this. I want to see what this looks like. I'm going to take my middle mouse button and I am going to depress it, hold it, and I'm just going to rotate or drag it around a little bit. And now you see how I'm changing, and I can kind of see now that third dimension, okay? And I'm going to rotate my roller towards me without depressing it or away. Away is going to be zooming out a little bit so I can see what's going on here. All right. So it's starting. It's like, okay, I know you want to extrude, but how far do you want to extrude? I've got to give it information. Now, there's a couple places that I can actually input my depth, if you would. And the depth that I'm going to change this to, sorry, 3 inches. I'm seeing in there. It's 3 inches. So step number 14 is 3 inches. Now, I can either put it in right here where I see depth. Okay, it's assuming 4.5 for whatever reason, I don't know why. Or do you see how on my model there's a dimension here? If I double click that dimension, I can change it there as well. And that's where I'm going to change it. Okay, so I'm going to input 3 and then enter, and it changed it for me. Now, the other thing that I can do here, notice that my sketching plane is back here. I can see where that is. And I can change which way this is actually going to extrude, whether it's into the screen or out of the screen. They made an assumption. So I can click that arrow and it's going to toggle it on one side or the other, okay? The other place that I can do this is just to the right of the depth that I just put in. It toggles it back and forth there as well, okay? So just like every other CAD system, there's like multiple ways of doing the very same thing, okay? So I've got my 3 inches, I'm good. I like the way it looks. Now, if you want to take it a step further and see and preview it like it's going to look when it's a final solid, see where these sunglasses are? It kind of takes away all of the planes and stuff, and you can see, oh, this is what my solid is going to look like. Okay, cool. It's still in preview mode, and it's not official until you do the OK button. Now I can go out of the preview, and then I can make any adjustments if I needed to, and then I can hit OK. All right. So now I'm good. Here's my solid block. Here's my solid block. Now, just like any other CAD system, I want to save often, and I always like to tell people, save at a point where if you're at that point, you're like, yeah, I don't want to redo this. Now, to me, a rectangle is not a big deal, but, let's save. So we're going to go up, we're going to say, okay, file, and we're going to say save. Now, remember, we gave it a file name when we defined that we were going to do a solid part, okay? Remember, we put block _ width _ hole, okay? And I can just hit the save button here. This is the first time I'm saving. So I'm going to hit it's gonna fill in my file name for me, and I'm just gonna hit OK, making sure that my working directory is the one that I set up, because it's gonna save to that working directory. And I'm gonna hit OK. Now, that was the first time that I saved. The next time I save now, it should just automatically save and not go to that directory. It'll verify it for you on that first save, even though it's not a save as, okay? So that first save will look like a save as, but then after you do it, it'll be normal. Okay, so now I want to put a hole in this, all right? So I have choices with a hole, okay? I can actually do a cut out of here if I wanted to, just like I did in SolidWorks, but instead of that, what I want to do is they have a nice, bless you, they have a nice hole, like wizard, if you would. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to put a hole in like this. So I'm going to say hole. And I have, again, it's going to open up the whole menus here, and I'm going to have options. The first thing I'm going to do is it wants me to do a placement. So notice here that this menu is like, okay, where do you want to put it? So I can go and I can actually position my cursor anywhere on the face that I would want to put it in. Now I'm going to go on this front face right here, but you could go on any one of the faces. You could rotate it around and you can put it wherever you want it to go. Okay, so I'm going to put it on that face right here in the front that they're using. I'm going to click on that and notice that it placed the hole. All right, now I can, reorient myself here. And I'm going to notice a couple things. I now need to dimension it to the sides of the part. So I've got to look on page 11 at the bottom. They want us to place this 1.5 inches from the bottom. Okay, so that would be this edge right here, this surface, and 2.5 inches from this right side over here. All right, so now you're going to notice something, and I'm going to kind of zoom in. I hope you can see it on the screen. They kind of show it in the thing as well. Right now, we have these two dimensions. There's this like dashed line here and this dashed line here. And these are going to be the distances away from those edges we just talked about. And notice that they have what we call broken diamonds. Right now, these two red marks, they're apart, okay? And when they go together, they make a diamond. Now, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, and I'm going to go over the top of this diamond, and it activates to be blue. I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag over to where it now becomes a connected diamond, and I'm going to release, and it's going to recognize that edge. Did you see what I did there? And now I can double click that 3 minus 3.13, and I'm going to make it 2.5, enter. And it positions it in that direction. Now I've got to locate it to the bottom. So I'm going to kind of zoom out here. I'm going to hover over the top, grab it, and then I'm going to drag it down to that edge. And now notice that it grabbed that edge. Oh, I got it. Position here that this hourglass on the left-hand side will always fit it to the screen for you if you find you need it. Double click on that dimension, and that is 1.5, and then enter. Okay, so locationally, I have my hole where I need to be. I think this hole wizard works way better than SolidWorks is, honestly. I for some reason, the hole wizard is annoying to me in SolidWorks, but this one works better. All right, so now I need to set the size of my hole. Now, you'll notice that up here, I have the ability to put the diameter in directly, or you can also see that I have the diameter identified on my drawing here, right? You see that? And how I'm moving this around is I'm taking that middle roller, I'm depressing it, and I'm just moving my cursor. This is just like SolidWorks, actually. I'm going to double click on that, and we want this hole to be 1 inch. So I'm going to put 1 and then enter. Now, the other place I could have done it was up here. So I'm going to change it to 1.5, okay? And I'm going to change it back to 1. So either place changes that hole size, okay, hole size. Now, just like SolidWorks, we have some options for how we want that to go in, right? So if we look at the depth here, one thing, this is new in this version. Normally they would have a little panel next to this icon and they would have your down arrow so you would know there was something down below it. But they just have this little itty bitty like corner triangle. You have to click on that to see your options, okay? So my options down here are blind, which is always the default, so I can put it at a depth. And then the one that we're gonna use here is gonna be through all. Or it can be up to next, which would be through until, or a reference plane. But we're gonna do through all, and this is where you gotta kind of think about your design and the potential for something to change. If I put in a blind hole here, and actually, let's do it. I'm gonna put a blind hole in, I'm gonna say, oh, that thickness was 3 inches, right? So at that 3-inch mark, when I go down here and I rotate this around, I can see, oh, it went through, cool. I'm gonna say, okay, all right? But now down the line, let's say I make that part 4 inches thick, okay, 4 inches deep. So I'm gonna go back to, now you don't have to do this right now, but it's just for purposes of, I'm gonna edit that extrude, and instead of 3 inches, I'm gonna double click it and I'm gonna say, oh, let's make it, actually I'll make it 3.5, make it a little bit thicker. So I'm gonna say, okay, that's cool. And my hole, as I look here, it's still in there, but now look, uh-oh, it's not going through anymore. If I go to the back side here, it remembers that its depth was 3 inches, right? So now it doesn't go all the way through. So now I've got to go back to my hole here. I'm going to edit that. And when I go up on top here, it's holding that 3 inches. So it's not going through. So to rectify that, I'm going to say, okay, instead of being a blind hole, I want it to be a through all. And now, no matter what the depth of that is, it will always, always go through. And if I do an hourglass on this, yep, now it's going through, I'm okay, we're good to go. Okay, so it's always nice to have those design intents, like possibilities for the future that might occur. Okay, all right, so now I've got my block. This is cool. I've got a block with a hole in it. You've made up your first part in Creo. I want you to orient it so that it fits on the screen. Okay. And then I also can see just a little bit, you gotta rotate it just a little bit, ever so slightly, so that I can see that it went all the way through. You know what I mean? Now, this is where for any type of a tutorial that we do, and I have you handing in the final part, this is where we're gonna do that screen capture, and we're gonna pull it into a document, okay, to convert it. Now, I'm gonna let you in on, I'm actually gonna hold on for a second. I'm gonna go back to the textbook. So where I took you to was through step number 26. I want you to stop there. Don't go any further. Then it goes into a mode where we're gonna recover a crashed program. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work perfectly each and every time. So we're not gonna worry about that right now. So I want you to stop on step number 26, okay? And this is the end of the tutorial then. All right. Now, part of your assignment is this tutorial. So if you followed along with me and you kind of did this along with me, you're done with the tutorial today. So to hand this in, what you're going to do is I'm going to go back into Creo, and we are going to do a screen capture or a screen snap, I think it's called. And that is going to be where we depress the Windows key, Shift, and then S. Okay. And then I'm going to go up into my upper right-hand corner, and I am going to click and drag until you don't have to do the full screen, but just get your object in here, okay? And the reason I want to have, all the way in is, first of all, I want to be sure that you've kind of followed along with the tutorial and that I can see your design tree here, that it's all set. Rather than if you just show me just the model, I can't really get the full picture that you did everything. So now that I have that, I am now going to open up a document. And so it can be Microsoft Word, it can be Google Docs. I always tend to default to Microsoft Word. So I'm going to go on my computer, I'm going to navigate down to Word, and I'm going to start a blank document. Okay. Now at the top here, I would probably, you know what, honestly, it's really not even necessary because when you hand this in, you're going to put it into a Dropbox, which is going to be for learning plan number 1 tutorial, right? This is only one drawing, so I'm going to just call it LP1 tutorial. And if we would have multiples to do here, then I would want you to do like a problem number or something like that, so it's identified. But now I'm just gonna you know, hit enter and go down to the next line. Now this is where I'm going to paste the image that I just did the screen snap for. And I can do that a couple different ways. I could go right here with my right click and I can hit paste and it's gonna put it in place for me. Or I can do Control V and it would paste it there as well. Either way, because it went to your, what do they call that? Why am I? Clipboard. It went to your clipboard. Don't you hate that? You know, you're talking, and it's like such a normal word. And I'm like, how come I can't remember that? All right, so here it is. Now what you're going to do is you're going to file and you're going to save this somewhere. This doesn't have to be in a working directory. This is just a document. So if you want to create a directory to kind of organize these digital files, you could do so. So I am going to just navigate. You could put it in your working directory. It's actually not a big deal. I'm going to, I'm going to save as, and I'm going to browse to my H drive. So if I did want to keep all my Creo stuff in the same place, I'm going to go to, this is Creo 1_2022. I might want to change that to working directory, and then maybe I just have a Creo 1 directory to put like all the other stuff in. Or you can put it all in the same place. It really doesn't matter if there's Word documents in the same place that your working directory for your other files for Creo are. But if you wanted to separate them, easier to find later on, they're there. All right, now I saved the Word document, but I am not going to upload a Word document or a Google Doc. I am not going to upload or, you know, a Google Doc or a Word document. The reason for that is I can't mark up on these files. I'll be able to preview it, but it's going to require me to download it to actually look at it, okay? So that's why you need to convert these to PDF versions. And it's really simple in here. You just go File, and you're going to do an export, and you're just going to have Create PDF highlighted here, Create PDF here, and then you're going to navigate somewhere that you can pull it back up. And probably in that very same directory that you saved would be a great place to put this. And then you're just going to hit Publish, and it's going to give you a preview. You can X out of that preview. That's not important. Okay, now I'm going to just minimize my window here. And I'm going to remember where I saved that PDF. So when I go to Blackboard, okay, when I go to Blackboard and I go to learning plan number 1, down to my homework assignment, and I go into LP1 tutorial, click on that. I'm going to go into where these dotted lines are for attaching a file. I'm going to hit local files and I'm going to navigate to where I found that. So mine was in my H drive, Creo 1. Yeah, see, this is like a bajillion. This was, I shouldn't have picked that one. So what was it called? It was called Block with Hole, right? See? Block. Oh no, I called it I'm sorry. I'm thinking of not the part. I did LP1 tutorial. There it is. And I'm going to grab the PDF version. Don't even add the Word one. It's not necessary. Some students would add the Word and the PDF. Just the PDF is fine. And I'm going to hit submit down at the bottom when it's attached there. Now it always gives me this error because I don't know why it doesn't let me like do stuff, but it's going to say success, you submitted, all that kind of stuff, and it's going to be in there for me to see. So that is how you would upload it. So PDF format of the screenshots, like, and then from either Word or Google Doc, whatever you want. The other part about the homework assignment for this learning plan is you'll do that tutorial and then you're going to do the review questions. The review questions are, I believe they're done here in Blackboard, and if I'm remembering correctly, they're fill in the blank short answers for, you know, the questions that are here. And there might be some, I guess I didn't. I did all questions. There aren't any multiple choice. So you'll submit your answers here, and these would come out of, watching the lecture and then also out of the book. Okay? So there's two parts to this homework assignment, the review questions and the tutorial. Now, this is going to be due when your LP1 homework is due. So make sure that you reference your specific calendar for your course for when that is going to be due. If you have any questions on doing this learning plan, I'll take those right now. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Now, to exit out of Creo, once you're done, just make sure that you do a file save and kind of make sure that you have that last save there. It'll go to the working directory that you created. And then you can just go out of file and you can go out exit, okay? And that is going to ask you if you really want to do it. You got to say yes, it's okay. And then it'll close down and shut Creo for you. All right, so that takes care of learning plan number 1. So by watching this video or attending this lecture, getting the homework assignments done, you will be ready for learning plan number 2. Now remember, as part of this course, you have to get 85% or better in order to move to the next learning plan. Now, I am going to tell you though, you will have access to learning plan number 2. So if you go back to this menu right here, learning plan number 2 will be available because it became active. What won't be available to you until you get the homework done and corrected for learning plan 1 is going to be this assignment. So the Dropbox for learning plan number 2 will not become available to you until you have learning plan 1 homework done. Okay, so that's how it'll sequentially kind of stop you from going to the next thing. You can start the activities, you just can't hand in the homework. All right, so that's all that I have. Any questions before I let you go on learning plan number 1? Okay, then I'm going to stop sharing and stop the video, but don't hesitate to contact me if you find that you have questions that come up as you're working. Okay, that's all that I have for today.